Hello, folks. Welcome back to Gelvin Valley on Farming Simulator 15. We've been in the process of rolling our fields, and I know I commented a number of times that the roller seems way heavier than what it would be in real life in terms of the tractor's ability to pull it through the field. It's just something that feels like it pulls too hard, and so I know I've bellyached about it a couple times, wanting to do a little bit of modding, maybe to fix it or correct it, if you will. So I finally remembered to do it before making this video here. And so I wanted to share what I did. And I realize, again, this is an old game, but I think the principles are similar. And just to encourage others, if you want to learn to mod at some point, these are some of the things you can fiddle with or try. This one here didn't take that long to figure out. But one of the first things, and I'll get off the game screen here real quick and head to the editor. Uh, One of the first things that I looked at was the sheer weight of the mod itself. There is, like, if you look, let me maximize this. If you look at the body of the machine, what you're going to notice is over here in the settings and the attributes, this describes the type of object that all of this is, and of course everything's going to land underneath it too that makes it up. But right at the top of it, this is where you define how it's going to interact in game and what kind of object it is. So obviously it's visible. If you didn't have that add, it wouldn't appear. It's a rigid body, meaning it's a hard object in game that things can collide with. If it wasn't a rigid body, it would be something you could drive over the top of, you could walk through, and it would be as if it wasn't even there. So it's a rigid body, and then which is going to pop up a tab over here for rigid body where you define it further. It has collisions, and it's defined here as dynamic. There's static. A static object will also have collisions, but it's going to stay put. A static object isn't designed to be moved. A dynamic object, on the other hand, is designed to be moved about in game. So if it's a tractor, if it's a roller like this, if it's a bale, if it's a pallet, those are going to all be dynamic objects because they're designed to be moved in game. Kinematic, I am less certain on the definition there, but I believe it's a type of object that has collisions where the movement is affected by something else. So it isn't widespread movement, kind of like a dynamic object where it goes anywhere you take it. It's more affixed to another object. It moves with that object and is affected by it. So this one here is a dynamic object. I won't belabor the point. And there's maybe some other things that we could go over here, but one of the things I want you to see here is the density. And I think this is where you add weight. Most of the objects, I think the default value for density is simply 1. And honestly, I don't know what it means. I don't know if it must be something in terms of kilograms per square meter. Not sure exactly what it means. All I know is the default, like I say, I think is 1. So if you want an object to be heavier, to pull harder, or to have more weight in there, like if you have something like a crane that's picking up stuff that's heavy objects, and I have worked with a modded crane in FarmSim 15. I'll share that I think on another episode. But if you're going to be picking up something heavy, you want that crane to have a lot of weight or ballast in it so that it doesn't just tip over, when you pick up a vehicle or a big old rock, just like you would in real life. You look at those cranes, they have weight, very heavy weights, and there's proper distribution of it, or that's what they try to maintain, so they can pick up heavy objects. Well, it's no different here. I mean, if you want to make this very, very heavy, you just increase the density to a higher number. And the modder for this chose a density of 1.155. Don't know if that was deliberate. Don't know how they got there. Uh, but the problem wasn't here. This was close enough to remember I was trying to fix a problem because this thing seemed so heavy. So I was fully anticipating coming in here and finding this, with a value of 10 or 20. And it's like, oh, we just knock it back down to 1 and now it'll pull a little bit easier. Well, that wasn't it. So I looked at the second component. This one here has two components, and this is just the attacher piece, this little bar here. And lo and behold, it's also a rigid body, and when I looked at it, this had a value of 10. So it had a massively heavy hitch component compared to the rest of the vehicle. So you see it's got a value of 1 here now. I obviously moved it down. I don't know how much difference that made. I mean, after I did that, it's like, oh my goodness, this one little piece is so heavy that it's, impacting the pulling of this roller around in the mat. Well, so I fixed it here. I took it in game, and lo and behold, it still ran pretty tough. So it didn't do much. I think it's a relatively small piece. You give it a density of the at, but I think the game also looks at the size of the particular object, relatively speaking. So probably if there was a value of 10 on all of this, well, then it would definitely be much heavier. But if it's just a small piece, a value of 10 here maybe didn't have that big of an impact. So those didn't work, so I kind of had to look somewhere else. And so I went to the XML. This is the XML file for the roller we just looked at. And it's like, what in here might impact, the ability to pull this thing in the field? So I would look around at some of these things. Well, I suppose it could be the wheels. Maybe there's something in here that would make the wheels turn hard, but I don't think that. I know that the tires maybe have friction on them when they were with the ground, but I didn't see anything here that would impact that. Um, There's brake force, but I don't think that's brake force applied by the roller itself. It's brake force required maybe to stop it by the tractor. So this is only brake force, on the tractor using it. It wouldn't be the roller itself. Lights, there's not going to be anything in there. Work area, I mean, this is normal in terms of defining what area is impacted by the roller. Ground reference node, that's something required for the cultivator specialization. And this has cultivation on it. That's a texture that it outlays. I mean, these are sounds. This is the attacher joint. Um, Ground particle animations. That isn't going to impact it. So I guess I just kept looking through here to see what might cause this to pull hard. And somewhere in here, hey, these are all the moving parts. Hopefully I come across it. Oh my, I must have gone right past it. Yeah, here's the two components down here. All right, let me see if I can go carefully scroll back up through here. Oh, okay, it was right here, right under my nose. Power consumer. So, and I don't know this perfectly. This is where like you just have to experiment with it. Power consumer, I think, is maybe where you need a PTO for it, and this is where you can specify the horsepower needed to pull this thing. Well, it had a max force of 38. And I didn't know anything about max force. I know it doesn't need a PTO. I mean, this is a simple roller, right? You just put it behind the tractor and pull it out over the ground, and off you go. Force node, I'm not sure what that is. This, I think, refers to, I mean, that's the entire unit. And then there's max force. So I was like, the original was 38. I put it all the way down to 1, and I took it into game, and voila, that is what impacted how hard this thing pulled. So it pulled very easy, so easy in fact that I bumped it back up to 10. And honestly, I haven't tried it in game yet. So maybe I'll get in there and figure out the 10 is still too high. I don't know. but I have a feeling it's going to pull, if it's 10, it's going to pull way easier than 38 based on what I saw previously. So I guess I just show all that. I know I've made a couple modding videos. Like I say, if anybody's interested, if you want to learn how to mod, some of it is just, getting a text editor and tinkering with some of this and seeing kind of see what the impact is in game of what you're doing. And somewhere in here, of course, I put there's another section added for the things I put on the roller to take care of rocks. Aha, rock rollers. Yeah, there's 3 rollers, and I put a trigger on each roller. I think I showed that on a separate video, kind of what's going on there. Those are the indices to the rock roller. Anyhow, that's the XML file. I think we fixed it, and I'm gonna head back in game here. Let me get a quick drink, and we'll continue our rolling. Here, our puppy. There he's barking. A warning on the rental contract. I think I'm paying through the nose. All right. Now I'm just now approaching a pretty steep hill, so this is going to give it an immediate test. I think previously I would slow down. Yeah, look at that. Look at that. I feel like I'm charging up the hill. Now maybe some of you would disagree. I think a tractor this size would be able to pull a roller like this up the hill. I got it full throttle as hard as I can go, 5 miles an hour. I think that would be feasible. But, oh, actually, let's just take a look real quick. I'm trying to remember what, is that yeah, 160 horsepower. Actually, there was a note someone left on here. What did it say? Yeah, recommended horsepower by manufacturer 110 to 240. Well, that's right in there. And now it's pulling it as easy as I would think it would do it in real life. And it's 150 horse, so I think it fits their specs. But like I say, whoever modded the app chose to make it pull quite a bit harder than it would need to. And if I would have had it pulled this easy the rest of the time, maybe I wouldn't be, maybe I would have got all this done and been within my rental contract and not had to extend it. So I think now the rental mod is making me pay through the nose. I almost think I'm taking it faster downhill than I did before too. I mean, wow, 15 miles an hour. I mean, this is going as hard as I can. Would you go 15 in the field? Maybe I wouldn't be going as fast. But it was fun to kind of figure out what can I say there. And this field in particular, man, I have to want to sell the thing after as much trouble as it was to harvest. I don't know how many times my combine tried to escape the field. I don't know if it's just shaped a little bit funny, to where it doesn't play nicely with the higher mode. I don't know. All I know is I had to reset my combine 2 or 3 times. It was a royal pain driving way over there to get the stuff. Or excuse me, not the combine, it was the header I was missing there. Well, right now, as I'm recording this, it's very early in the morning on a Saturday, done with the work week, and it's probably going to be a long time before this episode actually cares, given how many I have them stacked up for Gelvin Valley. But hope everybody had a good work week. Anymore, I kind of look forward to the times I can sit in here and, oh, miss a little rock. I'll try to get him on the next pass. Sit in here and just kind of dream. My little farm here in Gelvin Valley. My main dream is getting out of debt, and I'm still a little nervous, wondering how much interest I'm paying, because seems like the mod that I'm using in there, the Bank of Haggenstedt, or however you say that, I think I had 7 days to pay on my loan, and at the end of 7 days it demanded payment. They took all my cash that I had, and now I almost think, looking at the inner workings of the mod, when you don't pay on time, it bumps your interest rate up to 10%. And yes, I have a feeling of paying more than I would like to. You know, on interest rates, I know right now, you know, did everybody just see that? Where all the tire tracks just up and disappeared? What makes it do that? I have always wondered. It removed them all, and it's kind of like you start over. If somebody knows the answer to that, I'd love to know. But on interest rates, I know the economy at the moment is kind of teetering. You know, there's always been people who are doom and gloomers. You know, that the sky is falling. You know, where I remember that particularly around the year 2000. You know, as if the world would cease to exist the moment you woke up, January 1, 2000. You know, so you always have that crowd of people. And then you always have, oh, I don't know, I don't even want to call him the eternal optimist. In some ways it's naive, where good times are always going to be there, no problem, get into this, into that, you know, it'll always rise in value, you won't lose. Well, baloney. People can and do lose all the time. So who knows what the economy is going to do. I keep thinking interest rates are going to rise as they try to help fix inflation in this country and in other places. So we probably have some roughness coming, a rough ride with inflation and whatnot, or interest rates rather, as they try to fix them. I'm just thankful the home that I have. My wife and I were working on paying off the mortgage, trying to get that taken care of. It's a fixed rate, so whether the interest rates rise or fall, it kind of just is what it is in terms of the payment. But we're all going to feel the pinch, you know, because yeah, inflation, I mean, it just hits all of us, whether it's the fuel pump or at the grocery store or wherever. But on interest, I don't think we've seen anything. You know, I think I've mentioned before, I work with my father, and he started his business, his accounting business back in was it early 80s? The time period in the latter 70s and early 80s had extremely high interest rates. And he was at the office here, it's been maybe a year or two ago, I don't remember. I think he still has some of that old paperwork. He was going through some of it. It was in his credenza or whatever. He was cleaning some things out, and he says, "Hey, come look at this." And he showed me some of his paperwork from back in the day, and there was a period of time he had a loan and he was paying 25% interest. You know, we don't even have to pay that kind of rate on our credit cards now. You know, credit cards charge arguably the highest rates of interest, and we don't even have to pay that on those. Maybe if you royally screw up and you don't pay your balance, you don't make a minimum payment, You're late. I mean, maybe there's some things that stack up in there to where you can get up to 25%. I don't know. Maybe depends on the car. But I mean, my father at the time, I mean, well, maybe he was more of a credit risk than he is now. I mean, he was just starting his business, so that may have had some impact too. But I mean, if you look at the old records from that time period as to where interest rates were in the general economy, they were high. I mean, they just, yeah. And then slowly came down, I think, through the 80s as inflation got back under control. And I know my parents' house that they had, my siblings and I. Oh, we're not going to go smash that rock again. I think my dad said at one point that they were paying 11% interest on it, so maybe all of that is relatively speaking. We've just become so accustomed to much lower rates. I can't even think of what the rate is on a home mortgage. I'm pretty sure it's under 4% at least. I don't recall off the top of my head at the moment. But we've become so accustomed to that, we're not used to seeing those higher rates and having it take such a bite of us. But we may be heading back to some of those kinds of times. We need to buckle up on that. But like so many things, while I'm not going to say that nobody wants to pay higher rates of interest, anybody that's ever run a debt amortization schedule and you see the impact of interest, I mean, it is a form of slavery practically when you think about it. The time that it takes to pay off a debt instrument, when you see how it's amortized out, it's crushing, especially when you're starting out, with a new little family or starting your work career. It can really hurt to have to make some of those kind of payments. And you have some kids getting out of college anymore have debt from college, debt on a car, debt on a home, and sometimes, I mean, these can be huge. So some of the college debts I've heard of are enormous. To the point where you wonder if college is even worth it. And I think for many of these people, I don't think it is. But maybe it is to them. That's just my 2 cents. But if you have to be in debt, the amount of a home mortgage just to pay for your school, and all you have to show for it is whatever's between your ears. I mean, in my mind, that's not a very good trade. But each to their own, I guess. But like with so many things, interest being one of those in particular, it's a double-edged sword. Homes right now in this area are really, really expensive. And there's lots of factors, that go into a price of a home. Scarcity of property or scarcity of homes available. That'll have an impact, supply and demand. But another impact is the interest rate. If the cost of money is low, well, then that means landowners, homeowners can keep their prices jacked up versus time periods when the interest component is crushing. Because all else being equal, if a party's only able to make a certain amount of a payment, with whatever their income situation is, that has to poke out somewhere. So if you're paying a lot of interest and most of your payment's going to go to interest, well, then you can't afford as much principal, and that backs it into the cost of the real estate and what have you. Or so the theory goes. So we maybe have another time period coming at some point here with a healthy recession. And it becomes such a political football too. And I think, like I've mentioned before, I don't want to get into politics or any of that on here. And everybody's going to have their opinion. Maybe what it is as I get older, the less I like politicians who make all these promises, and then being human, they fail to deliver, or fail to deliver. That's one thing. If a person tries and fails, there's honor in that. But Sometimes they flat out lie. Well, nobody likes that. That's unacceptable, but I don't know. What about you all listening to this? Is there anybody that listens to this that genuinely loves politicians? I almost think they've done polls on that in our country, and politicians are even less liked than the press, and the press is extremely low. You know, I'm noticing here by taking this roller over this, by removing some of the weight, I wonder if it flops around more behind the tractor. That might have been a secondary unintended effect, if you will. Although I didn't really reduce the weight all that much. It was only on that little hitch piece, right? So, but I do think the lighter you make something in the mod, the more likely it's going to be to kind of, yeah, like it just did there. Back up. Of course, it's also the topography in here. It's very steep, and the edges aren't flat, so I maybe got a little too close to it with the chisel plow when I came through here. I just growing the grass. I'm just going to check the help menu. Yeah. I think I have a mod in there that helps turn that on or off. Of course, I mean, if there's grass in the field, which there wouldn't be. See, there's grass on the edge. I think you can have a type of cultivator that will behave similar to a plow. I think at Farm Sim 15 we had to have a plow to take it out grass like this on the edge to create a field. But I think there's a mod that has it for cultivators. And again, this roller has a cultivator strip on it. That's what's providing the texture behind it, the texture change. But there must be another one where even though the cultivator texture right now, like see how it isn't changing the texture on the edge of the field, but I think it's still lacking the grass. So, I thought that was deactivated according to this, wasn't it? Activate creating new fields, activate destroying of grass. I don't know. Maybe, you know what it probably is? It's probably a mod conflict. I think I'll just leave it be and try not to do any damage. Now, this is pretty steep, so even the changes we made down to 5 miles an hour, I still think I'm a little bit faster than I would be without it. It's just my roller is flopping kind of all over, and I think it's the unevenness of the terrain in this spot. Come on, stay on the hill. Grab some Velcro. I'm going to spin me out a little bit. I got all my differential locks set, and I'm full-on four-wheel drive. 1 mile an hour. Yeah, there's a... Yeah, this is... I'm on a bridge. Some of this is how I cut in the field. This was formerly a grass field in here, and I turned it into an arable field. So probably wasn't as careful as I should be going around the outer edges. It should have been a little further in, where it'd be a little flatter. So I think the worst of this is going to be in the outer round. Hopefully every other round will be nicer. Oh, come on. Man, I might want to go put some weight back on this thing, just to keep it from flopping all over. Because that doesn't seem realistic at all either. I know it's particularly bad. I've had it with a moldboard plow before, where you're taking it kind of over, not even that hilly of a hill, and it's just swinging like a pendulum behind the tractor. And maybe what it needs is more weight. I really don't know, but that might be what's causing it. But this is it's steep, but it's relatively smooth. So maybe that's why it's behaving kind of coming across here. Let's see. Almost done with the first round. Get this on the ground. Still fighting that. I think if I keep it up over the edge, it'll take care of it. I already had to fight with this earlier. You know, anytime you see it up on the edge, a lot of times there's a gap underneath the roller, kind of like there is there. Well, in the past, it wouldn't even do stuff under the roller there until I wrote a script to basically say, hey, ignore that. If it's down, you do stuff to the ground. Whether the game wants it to or not. So, kind of a hill for the next people. Well, I'm looking at the clock and I've already taken up a half hour of your time. So I'll just kind of perch here on the hill and I'm going to hit save. Thank you all for stopping by and joining me for a little bit on here. Hope you're having a great day, and if this is a weekend for you, hope it's a great weekend. I'll terminate the episode here. Goodbye until next time.